In any case, Dr. Robert Shapiro, who happens to be one of the world leaders in origin of life research, he is Professor Emeritus of Chemistry at New York University. This is what he says in his book. It's called Origins, A Skeptic's Guide to the Origin of Life. One favorite analogy of believers involves the discovery of a watch. We would not presume that this mechanism would come together from its parts by chance. It would function only if its components had been put together by a watchmaker. Similarly, the existence of bacteria and other living things, all of which are much more complex than a watch, implies the existence of a creator. He's talking about origin of life here, okay? He's a self-declared agnostic. Now, at this point, he almost sounds like Rabbi Shapiro, right? Listen carefully to the next line in the book. We will not take this escape route in our book, for we are committed to seeking an answer within the realm of science. Huh? He's committed. We're not going to take this route. I'm committed to finding a scientific answer. Now, I don't know if for those people who are listening carefully, this is what an outrageous thing for a scientist to say. No, I'm not interested in what makes sense. I'm committed to finding a scientific answer. Doesn't he realize that it is just as foolish for a scientist to think that because he's committed to a scientific answer, that means that magically creates a scientific answer? Because he's committed, that means there is a scientific answer? What if there is no scientific answer? It is just as foolish for a scientist to do that as it is for a theologian to think that his commitment to finding a religious answer means that magically creates a religious answer. What are you supposed to be committed to when you're investigating anything? Are you supposed to be committed to a scientific answer? Are you supposed to be committed to a theological answer? You're supposed to be committed to finding the truth. What difference does it make? If someone is seeking the truth, for what possible reason would you care if it's a scientific answer or not? He does care. He doesn't want it. He wants it to be a scientific answer. And what he doesn't even realize is what he's saying is, I don't want the truth. I want a scientific answer. And if you think this is isolated, I'm going to give another one or two examples and then we'll stop. Jerry Coyne. Who here, has anyone ever heard of Dr. Jerry Coyne? Dr. Jerry Coyne is a very well-known atheistic biologist at the University of Chicago, a highly accomplished scientist. Now, when this article came out in the Huffington Post, he was kind of offended by what Rabbi Jacobs wrote, what I had said in my book. And on his blog, which is called Why Evolution is True, he took pot shots at me and Rabbi Jacobs. How embarrassed he is that we're these fundamentalist crazy rabbis. He thought that Jews took science more seriously, etc. He said, I'm glad I'm a cultural Jew. Literally, he put a giant picture of a giant pastrami sandwich on his blog. I'm glad I'm a cultural Jew. And this is one of my favorite, delis where I could get a big pastrami sandwich. Anyway, okay. The point is that this man is a scientist, no question. He has impeccable scientific credentials. Listen to what he says at the end of his attack on me and Rabbi Jacobs. Here he sums up his arguments. Listen very carefully. And if anyone wants to look it up, they can look it up themselves. I'll give you where to look on the internet. Quote, "No, we don't yet understand how life originated on Earth, but we have good leads, and abiogenesis, which means life from non-life, is a thriving field. And we may never understand how life originated on Earth because the traces of early life have vanished. We know it happened at least once, but not how. We know it happened at least once, but not how. I'm pretty confident that within, say, 50 years, we'll be able to create life in a laboratory under the conditions of primitive Earth. But that too won't tell us exactly how it did happen, only that it could." Now, how a scientist knows something happened and then admit in the next sentence that he doesn't have any evidence that it did happen is a mystery that only someone like Dr. Coyne obviously can understand, because I certainly don't understand. I want you to imagine going before a judge, a district attorney, and he says, Your Honor, I know the defendant is guilty. I know he's guilty. So he says, well, Your Honor, what's the evidence? Well, the evidence, don't worry. In 50 years, we're going to have lots of evidence. Now, can you imagine saying such a... This is what he just said. We don't know, we're right, but I know it's true. And in 50 years, so, 50 years, we're we're both going to be, Jerry, did you find the answer yet? If we're still around. Now, can you imagine that a scientist actually wrote such a thing? This is the same type of attitude. He does not realize even how ridiculous this is. And the weakness of his position obviously speaks for itself. Okay? And of course he accuses me of being anti-science. One more and then we'll stop. And this is from the like I said, the leader of atheism today, the most prominent atheist in the world, Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, and this will be our final quote here. Richard Dawkins had debates regularly with believers, believing scientists. He had a very interesting debate with a Christian mathematician by the name of John Lennox. This was in October of 2007. If you're into this stuff, Google Dawkins-Lennox debate. It was at the University of Alabama. Very fascinating to watch. This is what Richard Dawkins said at the debate. This is a verbatim quote. He said like this: I think that when you consider the beauty of the world and you wonder how it came to be what it is, you are naturally overwhelmed with a feeling of awe, a feeling of admiration, and you almost feel a desire to worship something. I feel this. I recognize that other scientists, such as Carl Sagan, feel this. Einstein felt it. We, all of us, share a common kind of religious reverence for the beauties of the universe, for the complexity of life, for the sheer magnitude of the cosmos, for the sheer magnitude of geological time. And it's tempting to translate that feeling of awe and worship into a desire to worship some particular thing, a person, an agent. You want to attribute it to a maker, to a creator. This all sounds like Father Dawkins, right? Okay, so the question is, what stops him from taking that step? He means this. Richard Dawkins has an understanding of the living world that I certainly don't have. Maybe some of the doctors, the scientists in here do have that understanding. I don't. So then what stops him from worshiping his Creator? And he says, in his own words, what science has now achieved is an emancipation from that impulse to attribute these things to a Creator. It was a supreme achievement of the human intellect to realize there was a better explanation, that these things can come about by purely natural causes. We understand essentially how life came into being. We understand essentially how life came into being. Does everybody remember the old joke about Tonto and the Lone Ranger? Tonto and the Lone Ranger are surrounded by Indians, and the Lone Ranger says to Tonto, Tonto, what are we going to do? We are surrounded by Indians. And Tonto says, who's we, paleface? Right? We understand essentially how life came into being. Who's we, paleface? Is it Dr. Stuart Kaufman, who said that if anyone who says they know is a fool or a knave? Right? Was it Dr. George Whitesides, the one who said that, how? I have no idea. It seems to be astonishingly improbable. Who knows? Is it Richard Dawkins himself? And Richard Dawkins was interviewed in a movie by Ben Stein called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed, that was on the subject of this talk. Here's the interview. Ben Stein. Well, how did it start? Dawkins. Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life. Stein, what was that? Dawkins, it was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule. Stein, how did that happen? Dawkins, I told you I don't know. Stein, so you have no idea how it started? Dawkins, no, nor does anyone else. It is only the fact that he is able to live this self-deluding view of reality. And this is in the book. I give example after example after